Hey guys, it's Matt here, and today I'm doing another episode of Matt Rants. Also, we actually have a double feature. We have a double dose of Matt Rants coming out today, so you actually tune in to the next one a little bit later on during today. But right now we're talking about the topic at hand, which is going to be a bit like our Super Smash Bros. Ultimate rant that I did a few days ago on this channel. And the reason why is because we're going a bit more in depth, we're not just talking about the topic at hand, the actual controversy, which is in particular the Blizzard controversy at BlizzCon with Diablo Immortal. We're not just talking about that, we're also talking about YouTubers' coverage of that controversy. As you can tell from the title of the video and from the thumbnail, the question that we're asking today is this even a big deal? Now, we're not referring to directly the Blizz controversy or the Blizzard controversy. We're actually referring to the CUPodcast's coverage of the controversy. Now, why are we getting this meta like we did last time? Well, the reason why is because, and I'm only looking at two different YouTubers that I follow because I follow them. I didn't want to go through every single YouTuber out there because that is a lot of different YouTubers to go through, and also numbers would change so much over time that I wouldn't be able to track every single one for this Matt Rants, but I went through two in particular, two rather large ones, at least large compared to our channel, and the reason why I wanted to do that is because I wanted to show you guys how a quote-unquote controversy. Yes, you could say that some people are upset by something. I'm not saying that people, shouldn't be upset at anything they want to be upset about. However, how a quote-unquote controversy can be started when other larger channels talk about one large channel's video that got numbers, and I'll talk about them in a second, or a little bit later in the video, rather. But before we get into the details with the different videos and channels and things like that, I want to mention that I don't know any of these people personally. I only follow their YouTube channels and some of them on Twitter, but I don't know any of them. I don't even give any money to their Patreons, nothing against them or their Patreons. I just don't have that kind of cash. So I want to mention that, and also would like to mention as well that I've never played a Diablo game. I did not go to BlizzCon, nothing against Blizzard, nothing against Activision. I just have never played a Diablo game. So I wanted to make that known just in case you guys were wondering about that in the comment section down below. I just want to make that known right now and talk about that, give all that info out immediately as we're starting the video. So I'm assuming you guys do know about the controversy, the whole Blizzard situation, but if you don't know, I'll give a brief overview of that right now. So, a new Diablo game hasn't been released in 6 years, but expansions have been released, but still Diablo 3, which did have a rocky launch, was released in 2012. There was some rumblings of a new Diablo game coming out. There was a recent port of Diablo 3 on the Switch that people were kind of mixed on as well. Some were saying, oh good, I can play Diablo on my Switch. Others were saying, hey, it's a port, I want a new Diablo game, what are you doing? But either way though, when it came to this specific controversy though, it was at BlizzCon, and even though people were wanting a new Diablo game, one that you could play on your PC or even maybe potentially even on consoles or something like that, what ended up happening was Blizzard discussed, and they discussed this, by the way, in a big ceremony, a ceremony that you would usually come with some big announcement of a game, any type of game. It doesn't have to just even be a Diablo game in particular, but again, there were some leaks and some rumors that the media kind of hyped up that people thought, oh, we're going to be getting a new Diablo. Diablo 4 is going to be announced at BlizzCon, which if you guys don't know, is Blizzard's own convention. They made their own convention. So people were thinking that was going to be the case. However, Diablo Immortal spawned, that arose from the depths, and Diablo Immortal is actually a mobile game. There are no PC ports, there are no console ports. It is just going to be a mobile game. People are understandably frustrated, and I think that's fine. I'm not saying that you should be happy and completely pro-corporate on this. You should say, well, I mean, they're the ones that are giving us this. I guess that means everything's okay. But at the same time, while I do think that this was also a misstep due to the fact that how and when they announced it, this was supposed to be a big, huge thing. Their crowd there, they know, I'm sure they have metrics that they know that's going to be a bigger PC crowd. Granted, this was streamed online as well, so everyone from around the world could see this. But at the same time, I understand why some people there were a little bit miffed. However, I would also like to mention that this game is not being made entirely by Blizzard. They're not taking an entire dev team just to work work on this and throwing Diablo 4 to the wind. They even talked about other Diablo projects in the works. Blizzard is just taking a small amount of devs to work with NetEase, which is a company that develops mobile games. So there are other people working on these mobile games. It's not just Blizzard that's taking away time and resources, en masse, away from working on Diablo 4. Diablo 4 seemingly is still coming out. It was just not talked about at BlizzCon. And I really wanted to drive that point home because of the fact that this isn't like an indie dev team where there's only a handful, and nothing against indie dev teams, but where there's only a handful of people working on one specific title, working on that for years. You know, this is a huge corporation that has a bunch of people being able to work on one project at a time that are being hired to the point when, yes, they're hiring NetEase, like I mentioned a second ago, to work on the mobile game, Diablo Immortal. So in no way is this going to put a grind or put a halt on Diablo 4. Also, something else that I noticed as well during the event itself and afterwards on Twitter is that it seems like a lot of people are taking shots, or at least a fair amount of people are taking shots at the dev team. They don't make the decisions here. If you want to take a shot at the Blizzard higher-ups or the Activision higher-ups, okay. And I say shots as in just talking to them and saying, hey, I don't like this, or hey, I don't think this is the right decision, and things like that. You know, nothing, obviously, no threats or anything like that. Just saying, hey, I dislike this. Okay, but at the same time, the devs do not make any of the decisions. You know, I don't get mad at a cashier when the McRib is taken off the menu, nor do I get mad at people who come up with new ideas for burgers. Throw your ire at the higher-ups instead of these devs, which I have been seeing online. Also, a change.org petition was actually made, as if Blizzard was going to look at this and think, well, I guess if this petition is signed, we're not going to make a game to make us money. Also, I'd like to mention as well, and this is breaking news, by the way. So, breaking news right now, if you don't like this mobile game, you don't have to buy it. It's something that definitely does need to be mentioned, and I'm happy that we were able to break this news here on this episode of Matt Rants. Also, before we move on to the CUPodcast video, I want to mention as well, and this is my opinion, if they showed text with Diablo 4 on it, because there have been people saying, even in some videos that I'm going to mention a little bit later, people saying, hey, if Diablo 4 was talked about at the con, like just a text, just a video with text that said Diablo 4, and talked about what year it was coming out in, in my opinion, even though some are saying that the controversy would have been averted or mostly averted, I disagree pretty much 100%. And the reason why is because we've seen other companies do things like that, and unless the year is 2019, if it was 2019, I'll admit, okay, that's actually really close. You probably should have announced that there. But if it's 2020 or 2021, people are just going to sit there and go, why did you announce this so early? Why are we not seeing more of this? Why are we just getting text on a screen that says Diablo 4? Yes, there would be a pop, wrestling term, there'd be a cheer. At the time, people would be going, yeah. But at the same time, afterwards, people would still be saying things like, well, we didn't get enough. So I feel as if when it comes to toxic a specific amount of people who are being toxic, in no way am I saying the entire Diablo fan base is toxic. But to certain toxic people, they're going to be toxic no matter what. It doesn't matter if Blizzard had put Diablo 4 in text. They still would have said either we weren't getting enough, or frankly, I kind of would have understood in some ways that it is a little odd to announce something that many years in advance with having nothing concrete to show. If they had something concrete to show, okay, that's fair. But if they didn't have anything concrete to show, then why, that wouldn't have, in my opinion, that really wouldn't have changed anything. So in talking about the CUPodcast video itself, which by the way, all these videos will be linked in the description box down below, and what I want to say about it in particular is, yes, I don't think it was as in-depth as I just was, but at the same time, I would like to say that I don't think I watch a bunch of different YouTube channels that talk about the news. I look at them as, okay, entertainment channels where I want to see what one person is going to say, what opinion they might give on this, because I enjoy their personalities and how they mesh, in particular with Ian Ferguson and with Pat Contry. Now, throughout the video, I will be referring to them by their first names because their names are long, people's names are long, and I just want to say just the CUPodcast because, yes, there are two people in CUPodcast, and also this isn't like a literary, I'm not like writing an essay or anything like that, so I'll say Pat and Ian throughout, but again, don't know these two at all. So, but the thing with Pat and Ian is that I don't look at them and think, well, this is them reporting the news. This is, a CNN. This is an MSNBC. This is a Fox News. No, these aren't anchors. These are guys giving their opinion in a podcast format, very free flowing. As long as they have articles in the description box down below, I'd rather look at those to get more context. I look at them as a form of entertainment. Now, I'm not saying that they have to be wrong, right? They should be wrong. Of course they shouldn't be. But I don't think that their take was wrong. And and the reason why is because of the fact that I feel as if they made it very clear at the beginning when they were talking about this, when Ian was talking about this in particular, that he believes that there were two camps and there were a few people in between. Now, you can argue how many people in between. Maybe the two camps were smaller than those that were in between, but the two camps were people that were trying to immediately try to defend the devs no matter what, and defend the mobile game no matter what. With no nuance, and then those that were complaining and crying and whining no matter what, as if they were entitled to a game specifically to their specification, and then people in the middle who had a bit more nuance in their discussions. Even if you want to disagree with that necessarily, I don't know if that means that you're going to dislike bomb this, if you're going to say that they're completely misinformed in the same way that some other YouTubers have, which I'll talk about a little bit later on in the video, because I do want to not just talk about what they said on the CUPodcast, and of course the other YouTubers' reactions, but I also want to talk about the numbers, at least the numbers that I was able to get before and after this was discussed by other YouTubers. So, before the response videos were released, the video was at 14K. So that was how many people had seen the video. I sadly don't have the likes and dislikes at the time, but what I do want to mention is that their sub count, the CUPodcast sub count, or rather the Pat Contra YouTube channel sub count, is at 244K. So when you have a YouTuber saying, ooh, they're really putting down their fan base, their fan base, they're not liking this stuff at all. That is a pretty weak take, or a pretty odd take when, and I'm not trying to put them down here for their retention rate, but 244K, which is the entirety of the sub count, they didn't even watch the video. Now, yes, after the video was shared to it, not just with other response videos, but also shared, I'm sure, throughout the internet, now it had went from 14K to 27K, but again, still, 244K, there's still some missing people there. And also as well, saying that their fan base has been hurt or in some way or another, they insulted their fan base. Well, I am not a Diablo fan, so they didn't insult me, and I'm a fan of the CUPodcast. Now, I know some of you are going to say, Matt, that's semantics. But the reason why I'm getting this particular is because these two YouTubers that I'm about to talk about, at least one of them does consider themselves a news source. Hey, I am reporting the news. Actually, I would argue both do. We are reporting the news to you. So when you kind of frame things a certain way, I understand that different news organizations will have different takes on things, but it seems like both times there was a certain bias in there, and you could argue the bias here is the fact that I like the CUPodcast. Alright, that's fair, but I still feel as if that there was a bias in their videos, and that's why I want to talk about that right now. So, I haven't actually mentioned the YouTubers in question, and I probably should have, but if you went to the description box down below, you've seen who they are already. It is Tipster and Review Tech USA. I don't know Tipster's real name. Review Tech USA, that's Rich, so if I'll jump between, later on I'll jump between Review Tech USA and Rich probably a few times, but I'm moving on to Tipster right now because I feel as if he completely misrepresented what was going on. Now, I will admit, okay, I said completely, not for the entire video, though, because when it started off, I thought, oh, okay, this, even though, yes, he's a rather large channel reporting on this, or talking about this, so it's going to get more people to watch it again, like I mentioned earlier, but still, I wanted to see what take he had before making this video, because I didn't really see a controversy in the CUPodcast video, but then hearing him discuss this, it was, again, doing great at first, but then he tried to make it seem as if the CUPodcast was talking about all gamers, or specifically all gamers that were either at BlizzCon or those that are fans of Blizzard properties, or specifically Diablo properties, and that simply isn't the case. Now look, I know that people make mistakes, I make mistakes, but I feel like, and I say this not as gamers, as a society, I feel like we've lost this ability to try and parse out the actual message from something before the immediate fan outrage. So here's an example I have right here, right? If you and I are sitting, and I don't know you, you don't know me, but let's say we're sitting next to each other, and you're really upset, or you're feeling like it's a little odd, you want to call out these people that are jumping over across the room, right? And you're like, oh God, look at those guys. Look at those people jumping right now. They're just jumping over there. And I, as someone who's sitting, turn to you and go, why are you calling me out? I assume you would be very confused because you'd say, no, I'm not calling you out. I'm calling out those that are jumping. Why are you making this about either yourself, or why are you making this about someone who isn't? Because then I turn to, let's say, the room and I go, you're really saying this about all these people that are sitting? No, we're talking about the people that are jumping. So in this case, the CUPodcast video in particular, talking about people who are being toxic, and for some reason, and I don't know if it's knowingly or unknowingly, when it came to Review Tech USA and Tipster's videos in particular, it felt as if the skew was, wow, I can't believe the CUPodcast is saying this about every single gamer, and that just wasn't the case. You can watch the video yourself and you hear they're talking about toxic fans in particular. That's the whole point of the video. Now, you can say they went a little bit too far. Okay, I'm not saying that you can't say that in particular, but to say that, to act as if they were talking about every single gamer is extremely disingenuous. Also, I mentioned before that I may have went into more depth than the CUPodcast video, but I would also like to mention that even though I did go into a little bit more depth, that doesn't exactly excuse the toxic behavior from certain people in the fan base. Just because Pat and Ian didn't talk about that one joke, that very poorly received joke, that one person made on stage, I believe they were a dev, that made on stage, said, oh, well, don't you guys have mobile phones? Something along those lines. Okay, that was pretty dumb to say. I'm not gonna say it wasn't dumb to say, but that doesn't mean that it's like, if Pat and Ian had mentioned that, it would have just clicked, like, oh, so then the death threats are okay. Oh, the change.org petitions are okay. Like, that's not, and by the way, I'm not saying that in any way that either Tipster or Review Tech USA endorse either death threats or endorse the change.org petitions, but there was just this certain level of inaccuracy with trying to say, like, oh, well, Pat didn't know what he was talking about. And yes, by the way, I will fully admit that I have actually watched certain videos that, and he's even mentioned, or it was either Ian actually mentioned a few times during certain videos, that he did go into earlier videos a bit cold, as in not necessarily knowing or reading the topic, like knowing the headline or knowing what they were going to talk about, what would be on the docket or something like that, but not actually reading into it more in depth. So I'm not saying that that's never happened on their podcast before, but just this idea that, oh, because Pat and Ian didn't mention the one thing, clearly that everyone being upset in the way that they were saying was completely is justified. Now, did Tipster say that directly? No. But there is a problem that when you're sitting there arguing like, well, Pat and Ian are wrong in calling people out because they didn't even have all the information, then you're arguing that I would argue, you're arguing that the inverse is true. I would like to mention the dislike ratio again, and here's why. Tipster tries to say that that's the dislike ratio to like ratio signifies that Pat and Ian's fans are upset. However, as you guys know, you're on the YouTube. You're listening to me on the YouTube. I mean, you could have went to our Patreon and gotten the MP3 file there, in which case, thank you. But I assume you've, at least at one point or another, been on the YouTube. So you understand that anyone can like or dislike a video. You don't have to be a subscriber to do that. Now, it would be interesting if they did implement that feature, I will admit. But as of right now, as of this recording, that's not the case whatsoever. So you don't have to be a subscriber to like or dislike a video. Heck, you don't even have to watch the video for more than 5 seconds. So now I'm not trying to, put out conspiracy theories and saying this is exactly what happened, but you could have just as easily had people see or hear about the controversy, different people shared, let's say either Review Tech USA's, Tipsters, or other YouTube videos on this topic in particular. They could have said, oh wow, I can't believe that someone said that about the CUPodcast, or rather CUPodcast said that about all gamers, quote unquote. So then they went in, they disliked, and they left. Also, Tipster mentioned that the Pat the NES Punk channel lost 144 subscribers over the last few days, specifically after this video was released. Wow, 144 subscribers? 144 subscribers. Well, you know what? I have to be the one to say it here, and I'm sorry, I might be just changing my opinion mid-video. This is why Guantanamo Bay was opened. I mean, this is why it exists. We got to get them in there. We got to get them both in there. Sorry, Pat. Sorry, Ian. You have to go in there because this is completely an atrocity. I mean, when you have, I want to make sure I get the exact number, 244K subscribers, and you lose 144 over a video that's now been viewed 27K or more at this point, frankly, by the time this is out and edited and, and rendered and all that stuff. Wow. I mean, that's a lot of subscribers. How can they even sleep at night? These rapscallions, really. I mean, these vagabonds. How could they even look at themselves in the mirror? Probably not well. Alright, but seriously though, the reason why Matt, why would you make that joke, right? I understand why you're like, wow, like why is he going this hard? And the reason why is because Tipster, I've been watching Tipster for a little bit, for about a few months or so, and recently he started calling himself Tipster News. Now, I'm pretty sure it was Tipster News as I was watching it as well, but now it's in his thumbnails and it's a hashtag and all that stuff. So when you're looking at yourself as a news organization in some way or another, now I will admit though, he did mention, hey, I've had run-ins and trouble with Pat in the past, which is good because it is a good thing to bring up in the, not in the beginning, I don't think it was brought up in the beginning of the video, but it's still a good thing to bring up in general, just as like a, hey, disclosure, I've had run-ins with this guy before on Twitter. And he said, oh, I think the past is the past, but the way this video was framed, it's just, again, I don't know Tipster, right? I don't know this guy, and I don't want to say that this misrepresentation of facts was done willingly or unwillingly, but here's the thing. If it was done willingly, then, like I said, as someone who claims to be a news source, this is blatant slander and misinformation. Like, I'm sorry to say this, and I'm not saying that Pat the NES Punk should sue, all right, because it's YouTube. I'm not saying this is going to ruin his career or anything like that. Like, again, this is being made a huge controversy due to the fact that these other YouTubers are talking about it. It's not going to ruin his career. His YouTube channel is not going to get taken down. No one's going to be burning their NES, the Pat the NES Punk, books in protest, or the SNES one in protest, or his DVDs either. So that's not going to happen. But at the same time, this still is misinformation that's being spread with, and the saddest thing too about it as well is it's being spread with peppering in certain facts here and there. So there's facts peppered in. So the fact that he lost those subscribers, that is a fact. The fact that people clearly don't like the video, people in general clearly don't like the video from the, from the dislike bomb, clearly that those are facts. But it's just interesting when you look at how many people are actually interested in Diablo, how many people are interested in gaming overall, and saying, wow, I mean, Pat, you really said so much about why did you say those things about your fan base and all of your fans? As if every single person who watches the CU podcast on a daily basis loves Diablo. That right there is just a complete spin of what's actually going on, and that's why that was the first thing that got me interested enough to wanting to talk about this video, that complete misrepresentation of what's actually happening. But moving on to the Review Tech USA one, this one, I don't think that. Well, the first one, I do wonder, with Tipster, I do wonder if that was a willing misrepresentation. In this case, I do think it's completely unwilling, because I do think that it was nice that Rich had started off with that disclosure of, hey, I even give the CUPodcast Patreon. I know Pat and Ian, I've met Pat a few times, but that doesn't change what I'm going to say about this, because you know what? Yeah, you can have disagreements with people that you know. You can have disagreements with friends. That's just fine. The problem is that, again, this one came off rather biased as well. And the reason why is, even before I get into the talks about the CU podcast, like their arguments and things like that in relation to what, Rich said about that and stuff like that, I want to mention something that I found very interesting. So when I did the Super Smash Bros. Ultimate rant, the one about Mr. Game & Watch, one of the YouTubers that I had in mind that I'd watched that I thought was such a huge YouTuber talking about this, essentially making it a controversy when it really wasn't. And I say controversy in terms of, yes, people were offended by it, but more people were offended by the people that were offended. And there weren't even that many people offended. There were more people who were offended by those that were, quote-unquote, offended, to the point where it seemed like, I mentioned this during that Matt Rants, it seemed like for every one person that said, oh, that Mr. Game & Watch thing is racist, or that caricature of Native Americans is racist, for every one person that thought that, there were another 20 that were calling them SJW cucks. So, when in that case, though, the title of the video was, oh, these SJWs are upset, and Rich was talking about this as if all SJWs are upset about this one thing, despite the fact that the people that I follow, who some would consider SJW on Twitter, and we're all talking about, people on the left, we're all talking about voting that Tuesday, rather than talking about Mr. Game & Watch. There were more people covering Nintendo's statement, rather than people actually covering the initial story. But anyway, again, you can see the Matt Rants on that to get all that context, all that juicy context. But still, it's interesting that when it came to the SJW thing, it was immediate Rich saying, hey, these SJWs are all upset about this, without talking about that nuance. But the second that you have Pat and Ian talk about, or Ian in particular, talking about there seems to be two camps, immediately Rich was like, no, those two camps are so small. The majority of people are just upset over the fact that they wanted Diablo 4 rather than Diablo Immortal. With no whining, no crying, nothing like that. Just, they were a little bit upset. That's all. It's just very interesting that when it comes to, and I know everyone has blind spots, not everyone is part of every single community. Again, I don't even play Diablo, so I do understand that, different people have blind spots, I get it. But at the same time, it's interesting that when it's not his community, just like it's not necessarily my community, all of a sudden there are, it's all of them, or it's a majority of them, or they are upset. Because to be fair, he never said all SJWs are a majority of them. But when you say just one group without any kind of qualifier, like if Pat and Ian truly said Diablo fans, without the qualifier of this specific subset, which again was mentioned earlier in the video, if that hadn't been done, then yes, understandably, you would think it's all Diablo fans. But the problem is, both Tipster and Review Tech USA's videos, I should have mentioned this earlier, they don't show all of the video, which, yes, you would think, of course, they're not going to show all the video. You would then have it be mostly a reaction video. But the issue with that is that when you only show certain parts of the video, it's a very nice cutaway to make sure that you seemingly you have them talking as if they're talking about, in this case today as being Pat and Ian for the CUPodcast, talking about how every single Diablo gamer clearly are the bad guys here, are toxic here, all think this, when it's just not the case at all, as I've been mentioning throughout the video. Now, one part of Rich's video, which I found very interesting, he was saying that it seemed as if Pat and Ian had missed the mark, and he didn't really understand why they had said the phrase that people deserve less than what they think they deserve. Now, the reason, actually, even before he even mentioned that, he was talking about the fact that Blizzard owes them, the fans, rather than them owing Blizzard. Now, I would argue it's cyclical. It isn't exactly one person owing the other or vice versa, or one corporation owing the other. It was a cyclical, any relationship, quote unquote relationship, is cyclical when it comes to buying a product or buying a service. And it's basically, it comes out like this, right? So I think of it in the same way with like WWE professional wrestlers, or if you don't have to be a WWE, or when it comes to actors and things like that. I, pay for this movie, or I pay to go see a WWE event to see these pro wrestlers perform, but at the same time, they don't owe me anything else after that performance. I'm paying for that one specific product. So in other words, I'm paying, let's say, Marvel for the DVD for Infinity War. Or the Blu-ray. They're not going to sell me the DVD anymore. They're going to probably give me a freaking Blu-ray DVD combo pack. So I buy that. And that's what they give me. I don't get the right to high-five Chris Evans whenever I see him on the street. I don't get the right to dictate how I want the movie to be made, how I want the movie to come out. I vote with my wallet, which, to be fair, Rich did say that, but I don't have the right to say, hey, just because I'm a fan, that means that I get to do this, or this has to be done this way for my particular tastes. And the reason why is because of the fact that, as I'm sure you guys know, no one's taste is exactly the same. So if I was a Diablo fan, would my take not be important if I said, oh, but I actually want them to make a mobile game? Hooray! Would that be my take? No. But still, if it was my take, would that mean that my take is less valid? Why would it be less valid? So, and I'm not saying that Rich is directly saying that in general, but still, this idea is that it's cyclical. If I paid to go to BlizzCon, then BlizzCon, or Blizzard in general, should be telling me what's coming up. I didn't pay to have Diablo 4 be told to me at this exact moment, at this exact time, at this exact venue, on this stage. If I paid and thought that I would get that, then okay, I thought I would get that. In the same way that, I thought that maybe certain people would live in Infinity War that didn't live. That's what I thought would happen. But it didn't happen. They don't owe me anything other than what I paid to see. But still, BlizzCon never said directly, you're getting that Diablo 4 today. If they had, then of course that's bad marketing. It's all on Blizzard to actually make something that certain fans would want to see. But that still doesn't mean that they are owed that. And that's the difference. A good business will make something that fans want to see, more fans than others. Okay, fair. If you guys want to talk about those business practices, that's fair. But to say that they owe you anything, that is when I would argue, and I don't know Rich personally, but that is when you step into the entitled area. Not that you're getting it for free, although it is funny because you're potentially getting Diablo Immortal for free. But still, not about getting things for free. It's just about this idea that you are asking for something that I think is overstepping the bounds. So as we're wrapping this episode up, we have to ask the question again, is this even a big deal? And I'm going to go with no. And the reason why is because, look, I'm not trying to say anything bad about the CUPodcast, about Pat or Ian, but just like me, they're just guys, right? We're just, all of us are just people that are on YouTube talking about things that we like, reviewing things that we like, doing whatever it is we like. If it's not, just about gaming, it's about other things as well, of course. We're just having fun on YouTube. Of course, there's corporations on here as well, don't get me wrong, but we have a message that we want to deliver. We want to deliver, our passions or something. There's some reason why we're on YouTube. It isn't the fact that we're these big, huge, giant celebrities. A lot of us on YouTube have been made into celebrities in some way or another, but there is I do not believe that when I watch the CUPodcast, I'm seeing the faces of God. Ian has that kind of beard, and Pat had a beard at some point or another. I do as well. It's funny, my students used to call me Jesus, but still, I'm not looking into the face of God. I'm just looking at two guys talking about something, hearing it from their point of view, and at the same time, I'm not saying that any of you guys shouldn't critique what they said. I'm not saying that none of us should critique anyone, because that would obviously be a very bland world. It's the fact that this has become such a huge issue where people are asking, or rather demanding, an apology from the CUPodcast over having a different opinion. They did not insult every single gamer. They were talking about specifically a toxic fan base. If you are not in the toxic fan base, then you have nothing to be offended by. Are all Blizzard gamers or are all Diablo gamers part of the toxic fan base? No. They are a subsection. They are only part of the fan base. Are you one of them? No. Then you don't have to be offended and you don't have to demand an apology, because I don't think that one is coming anytime soon. And I really don't think one needs to come, because again, this is not a big deal. We are not news stations, news organizations. Again, I do think that with Tipster and Review Tech USA, there's a bit more responsibility there, because they do try to come off that way. But in no way other than the stuff with Mike Kennedy, to be fair, I never looked at the CUPodcast with this air of such importance. But either way, guys, I want to hear what you have to think. Do you think this is a big deal? Do you think it's not? If you disagree with me, that's totally fine. Please comment down below. Would love to hear what you guys have to think. If you like the video, you can like and subscribe. If you don't like the video, you can still like and subscribe either way. You can hate watch us. You can hate watch everything we do. That would be awesome. Alright, guys, so thank you all so much. Love you all. Take care, and tune in next time for another episode of Matt Rants. Alright, guys, so see ya.